Hey everybody, Tech Talk Tuesday. Almost was late. We got a pretty good storm going here, really big electrical storm and rain. It's torrential. I even hear a little bit of ice out there. Please don't mind the rattling here. I'm going to try and get in order. Jackie printed me out some dyno sheets so I could talk to you guys with some prior experience that would be a great visual for you. Hey, Alan and Brad, I want to talk today. We're going to talk about the difference between the horsepower and the torque, or the torque and the horsepower on a dyno sheet and in application where we can actually feel it in our butt and experience it on the racetrack, on the highway, and this will be for all engines because there are a few round things. Hey, Scott, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Ricky. I want to tell you guys, I watch most of you guys. It's great to see what you guys are doing and how it's going, but I wanted to share. This is about all engines, you guys. I want to tell you a few common denominators. All dyno sheets, all engines, diesels, gasoline, race cars, small blocks, big blocks, Hayabusas, Harley Davidsons, Chevrolets, Ford, Chrysler, all of them have a crossing in their dyno sheet at 5,200 and 52 RPM. And some of you guys on here know this, and it'll make sense to you, but I'm putting a little bit of cart before the horse here because I see only a few folks have signed up, so I might have to backtrack a minute. But I'm going to also spend just a quick minute to tell Darren and Doug and Andrew and Billy how awesome it is to see your names on here, and I'm very thankful for it. You guys are pretty... it's really great for you guys to come and sign up here and watch this. Some of you are weekly. I can count on some of you to sign up, like Steve and Chad, and some of you guys sign up a lot. Charlie and Bryce, what a cool name, and Cash. Man, who wouldn't want to name Cash? That's so great. Hey, Fred. So if we have any internet trouble or any service trouble here, it's going to be because we're having a torrential storm outside. I see where the rain is coming in sideways. I don't know if that's really a good thing. I like for it to just sprinkle down a little bit. I hate for it to come in sideways. Hey, Jason. Hey, Scott. And if you can hear a little ice on the windows, but listen, y'all, it's 90 degrees today, so it's really crazy right here. I feel like where I live in Nashville, it's so close to the middle of the dyno sheet where the east and the west, and some's torque on this side and some horsepower on this side, and our weather can't decide whether it wants to be a torque storm or a horsepower storm. It's really kind of crazy. But back to the story, Sam, James. Yeah. Chris, hey, and Mike, thank you guys for tuning in. What I'll do is I'm going to tell you this is Tech Talk Tuesday number 149 in a row. I was 1 minute late today. That's probably the most I've been off in 149 weeks, so I'm going to brag about that for a quick second. Hey, Kevin, that's a guy right there that knows a lot about horsepower and torque and the RPM range, and just calls. But like this will show, I know I'll do better showing you this, but this is the where the horsepower and the torque cross. Just so you know, I have several sheets, and I'm going to use some examples of what we have learned. I'm going to spend a minute on some... I want to tell you that all of us here know that diesels run at a lower RPM, and they make a lot of torque because 5,200 and 52 is the threshold where anything after that's going to be more horsepower than torque, and anything before that, 5,200 is going to be more torque than horsepower. And I know that sounds like, what planet are you from, George? When you look at any engine, diesel, gasoline, race, street, any of them, when the power curves come across the dyno sheet, when you get to 5,200 RPM, everything before 5,200 is going to have more torque than horsepower. Everything after 5,200 is going to have more horsepower than torque. Now, did I just say that the torque has to be peaked before 5,200? No, I didn't say that. There are some dyno sheets that doesn't even have 5,200 on it. It starts off at 7,000 and goes to 14,000. We have some dyno sheets on some pro stock racing engines that start at 7,000 or 8,000 RPM and go to 11,000 RPM, even though NHRA limits them to 10,500. I think it would be a great, if I was racing 500-inch pro stock, I would run it all the way to the rev limiter on every dyno sheet so I could learn where to how far and I'd adjust the power curve to be in the range they let me run. Nowadays in 2022 in pro stock motorcycle, there is no rev limiter rule. It's one of the only professional categories that does not have a rev limiter rule. Think about this real quick. Back up just a second. NASCAR's got a rev limiter rule. NHRA Pro Stock's got a rev limiter rule. Top Fuel Funny Car Nitro's got rev limiter rules. It's going to be a little bit, we'll end up with a rev limiter rule on pro stock motorcycles too. And I hate I even said the words on the air because you never know who's listening, right? But every single one of those, IndyCar, Indy 500, there are so many, Formula One, they all have rev limiter rules. They set the limiter by the organization or the sanction so it controls outrageous research and development, because when they were unregulated, NASCAR was turning RPM beyond belief. Pro stock cars were turning over 12,000 RPM. I know some people call BS on that, but I got proof, and I've seen it where they had turned to 12,000 RPM in a 500 inch. Now the rules say 10.5. That's you. They thought it was going to slow down the people that were turning 11.5 to 12, but it didn't really hurt them that bad. I'm sorry about the text messages I'm getting, the voicemails I'm getting. I don't even use my phone for that. I use my phone for Tech Talk Tuesday. I use it for Instagram posts. I use it for Facebook posts. And I use it for emails. I don't hardly even use it for this is called a telephone or cell phone, but it's my handheld device. And I've got it on a tripod right now, and I'm going to show it to the board, and we're going to talk some more about these things. So everybody got to see me now. Let's look at something that looks a little better than that. All right, let's switch now. All right, I want you guys to see. This is Tech Talk Tuesday, number 149. Everybody can see that, right? Can you all hear me okay? I wrote down a few things I wanted to share with you on this page. I wrote down that I'm going to talk about a few of these and a few of these and a few of these. And I just wanted to tell you, this is Tech Talk Tuesday, number 149. This reminds me of my Lord and Savior, because I want you to know that I am a fan of the people that the good Lord gave gifts to. And there are some people out there that do things that are amazing. There are people we know, we might not like them personally, but if you're like me, we admire and appreciate and love the gifts that the good Lord gave them, even if they're not friends or I'm not a big fan. I am like, there might be a world champion or somebody that does really good in their sport or in their career, and I might not be a fan of the person, but they have obviously a God-given gift that allows them to excel, and I'm a fan of that gift. So even if I have frenemies on here, people that want to see this stuff and they want to critique me or they want to challenge my claims or what I think I know, please capitalize what I think I know. I'm going to give it all. This is a great chance for me to give the good Lord the glory for giving me 40-something years to study this, do it wrong, blow it up, drag it up and down the highway, throw it on the ground, run over the parts, catch it on fire, burn up bars and rail cars full of 2618 alloy, and blow up a 4032. I blew up all the 2618. I blew up all the regular old iron and steel and aluminum, T6, whatever all that stuff is. I can't even remember those cool numbers. But anyway, this is from experience. And I'm going to talk about what I think I know right now, and I want you guys to follow along with me, and we will challenge some of the claims. And the one that's really hard to imagine is the dyno sheet right here. This is just a typical dyno sheet that has numbers to the left of 5200 and numbers to the right of 5200. And I say typically to the left of 5200 is big engines, and to the right of 5252 is small engines. And that's not true, because there's a lot of really big engines. But I want you to understand the words big and small are relative terms. Relative terms. Like a big engine might be a 500 in compared to a 400. A small engine might be a 300 in compared to a 500. But also, please understand that the smaller the engine is, sometimes it seems they can rev higher. Therefore, they focus more on horsepower on this side of 5200. And big engines have a harder time revving, like a big diesel. They don't rev up real good, and they run 2,000, 3,000 RPMs at the most. But they have so much torque left of this line and so much horsepower for gasoline engines after this line. And people say all the time, well, George, you got cams for sale, or Billy Bob's got a cam, or Tommy Johnson's got a cam, or Jimmy Smith, or Biggie, or Bob, or Tom, or whoever sells them. Is this a horsepower cam? Then the guys, the experts on the internet, call them, you don't want that, that's a horsepower cam. Or they'll say, you don't want that, that's a torque cam. They're not, y'all. They're not a horsepower cam or a torque cam. They all are the same, and they one of them may make more power before 5200, and one of them may make more power after 5200. If it makes more power after 5200, I'm going to call that a horsepower cam, or what you're trying to call one. And if it makes peak power before 5200, that would maybe be called a torque cam. I'm going to start off right here with some of you, if you don't know, you can look it up. But there was a bike I had. It was red. It was a bagger. It was called Bagzilla. It had almost 200 horsepower. This is a STD correction, which I use SAE probably just for comparison for everything. But this particular dyno sheet said it had 201 with this tune, and it had 188 with this tune. And I turned it 7,700 RPM. The dyno sheet says that it made peak power at 7,700 RPM. That's a lot of RPM for a V-twin 2-valve Harley. This is not a 4-valve. This is a really big, well, it was a 4.4 bore and a 4.375 stroke. And it made peak power at almost 7,500, 76, 7,700. And at the racetrack, when I was trying to go fast with this motorcycle, y'all, I turned it 8,000 RPM because it wasn't falling off on this tune. It kept going. So I turned it 78, 7,700 and shifted it, and it fell back to right in here. I put a star to where I would shift out of first gear and fall back to second. I would shift to third, fall back in the next gear. I'd shift the next gear and fall back the next gear. So I stayed in this range of RPM. But if you'll notice, that keeps me close to 200. I come in just under 200, and I run out over 200. I come in just under 200, I run out 200. So my whole run down the drag strip was around 200 horsepower. Now, everybody says, okay, but torque matters. Okay, well, let's go down here and look. This same engine, same dyno sheet. It says that I had 139 foot-pounds here, and I had 130 foot-pounds here. Well, you know as well as I do that a Milwaukee 8 with a cam and a pipe makes that much torque. So would you rather have a 130 foot-pounds, 139 foot-pound motorcycle, or a 200 horsepower motorcycle? Well, you say, well, George, that's not where torque is. No, it's not, but torque is here. They crossed at 5,200, 52 RPM. The horsepower curve and the torque curve crossed here. And this particular motorcycle, I never cared how much torque it made. I never cared, because this right here is just not interesting to me. Now, I'm going to explain that to you in a minute, but this, as an engine builder and a racer, I wanted to stay near the peak horsepower through all the gears. And speaking of that, the key word on it was gears. All the gears. I needed all the gears I could get, and I wanted to keep it on peak power as long as I could. Notice the torque is falling away. Yes, it is. But somewhere over here near 5,500, it had a peak torque number, and the dyno sheet said it was 5,700 with one tune, 5,400 with another tune, and it had 100 and somewhere peak torque. It had 169, 167. But that was over here at 5,900, 5,500, in this range where it made peak torque. But if you go down the track and you're out running your buddies and you're shifting over here and coming back to here, and you're shifting over here and coming back to here, I never had to worry about this particular part. And so my friends would say to me, George, I need it to make power over here. So let's put the sheet right here, and let's move this right here. They say, I need it to make power at, this is 4,000, this is 3,000, and I need it to make power over here at 2,000. So let's just talk about this curve. this horsepower curve would look like this, right? And the torque curve would look like this. All I did was take these particular curves and extend them off the dyno sheet to kind of get a visual of where we were going. Yes, it was going to have more torque here at 2,000 than it had horsepower. Yes, it was going to have more torque than it had horsepower at 4,000. Yes, it has more torque than it does horsepower at 5,000. But at 5,500, they crossed. It's got more horsepower and it's got torque. That's what I'm saying. All the engines do this. And then you say, well, George, that's a racing engine. Yes, it is a racing engine. Okay, here is a street engine. I'm gonna hold it up close to the camera. And I'm gonna let the camera down so we can see better, maybe. All right, this was a 124 that I did for Mark Fricky way back when. I can't even remember how long ago it was. Might have been 18. I was really interested in the tune. At the RPM range we ran it, so you can see how good a job I did on the air-fuel ratio, getting it dead on my 13-1 number, 13.1, 13.2. But I want you to also notice that the crossover here is exactly at 5,200 and 52 RPM where the horsepower and torque cross. This motorcycle made great power. It made 160 horsepower over here at 6,500. And since it's a small engine in today's world, y'all, 124 cubic inches is a small engine. So over here in the where we would run it on the street, 2,500, 3,000, 2,500, 3,000, we were down on torque. We were down below 140 foot-pounds because it is a relatively small engine. Now, driving around on the street at 2,500, 3,000, this was fun at 130, 140 foot-pounds. And going through the gears, it was fun. Going through the gears. But look at the horsepower, man. When I'd shift this at 5,000, it'd be coming back to 3, shift at 5, coming back to 3, shift at 5, coming back to 3, because I wanted to drive it at part throttle and enjoy it. But if I was going to race somebody, I would shift here at this star, and it would fall back to this star. I would shift here, it would fall back here. So what I was doing was I was past torque peak. I was using the horsepower in this range to accelerate the motorcycle where I could go faster than everybody in every gear with all 6 gears on this motorcycle. Now, I wrote down right here that it had 161 horsepower and it had 149 foot-pounds of torque. Those are peak numbers. It made a peak of 161 horsepower and it made a peak of 149. But in the usable range where I was racing it, I was operating above 150 horsepower through every RPM of each gear. Turn it here to the rev limiter, shift over here. Turn it here to the rev limiter, shift over here. So I was using the whole horsepower curve. Now, driving to work or driving back and forth to school or driving back and forth to eat or go on your job or just enjoying yourself riding with your buddies, you only run in this range. It's pretty weak here compared to some of the big engines because it doesn't have a lot of torque here. But I got to tell you about this gearing thing. In the cars, we have something we call the high stall torque converters. You ever, when you guys ever had race cars, or you back in the day, you had a hot rod and you had a pretty lumpy cam in it where it would idle around the drive-in. Some of you young kids won't know what I'm talking about, but you would idle around the drive-in where you would pull up there to the Sonic and just idle around and be counting off. The cam would be sounding good. It'd be like a 3/4 or 30/30 or some kind of purple cam, and it would have some counting to it. L88 cam, and then when you would floor it, it would bog because it didn't have any power down here. You had to get it up on the cam to get it to make some power. So we had to put gears in the back. We had to go from a 308 to a 410. We had to go from a 355 to a 456 to get it into the cam sooner. We would have a high-speed torque converter, or what they call a high-stall torque converter, to keep it on peak power sooner and longer. I wrote down snowmobiles, and if you guys up north know about this, you know that when we find out where peak power is on a snowmobile and you floor it, and you've got the clutch set right, it will stay on peak power the whole time. It just stay there. It just keeps it there, and that's really what makes that work. Let me jump around here for a minute. This is a good street version. This guy right here was a great customer. I probably did 3 bikes for him. Since I've retired, I don't build engines for people anymore. All I do is sell cams and a few cylinder head parts and some ideas. But this motorcycle was a 113 CVO. It came in. It was a twin cam 110, and he wanted it. It made this much power. It made like what it made? It made 77 horsepower, 94 foot-pounds of torque. Over here, it made peak torque. Over here, it made peak horsepower, and it was pretty weak to drive. Big, heavy motorcycle with about 80 horsepower. And some of those 110s only made 80 horsepower, y'all. So we put our Thrasher kit in it that jumped it from a 110 to a 113, and we put our cam, our head work, a D&D pipe, and a good tune. And if you'll look at what the cam did, it moved the peak horsepower from 5,000. Let's see. Peak horsepower. Say it was at about 5,000. It moved peak horsepower over here to 6,500. People say, wow, that's got to make it down pretty soggy down low, because you moved the horsepower from having peak power at 5,000. You moved it all the way over here, peak power at 6,500. That might be true, but look what happened at 5,000, y'all. We moved the peak over here, but look how much power it made at 5,000. I mean, we gained him 30 or 40 horsepower right here at peak. And over here on the torque, you say, yeah, but look, George, look how much torque it made stock right here. It had, at 2,000 RPM, it had way more torque stock than it did. There it is. I'm back. I'm sorry. It made way more torque stock up to 2,500 than it did with the cam. Is everybody still on here? I just want you to know that if you get into this situation with this motorcycle like David did, this dyno sheet was all done in 6th gear. I don't know who out there that's watching us right now. I don't know who of you floor it at 2,000 in 6th gear. Put it in 6th gear, let the engine come all the way down to 2,000, and then go, oh. Why not downshift? Put it down 5th. Put it down 4th. Floor it. Oh my gosh. Guess what? If David was to drop down here to 2,000 and drop this bad boy down to about 3rd gear, man, it would probably stand up and do a wheelie. Look how fast the torque curve grows. This torque curve crosses almost at a 90 from the stock torque curve to where it's going, just to get it into power range. That's what your transmission's for, y'all. You don't dyno in 6th gear, 5th gear. I see people all the time. They bog their motorcycle down to 2,000 RPM in 5th or 6th gear. And I drive motorcycles a lot. I got thousands and thousands of miles riding a motorcycle. And if I have a motorcycle that runs good down the highway, I don't bog it down to 6,000 or bog it in high gear, 6th gear. Your car, take your brand new stick shift car, your old Chevelle or your Mustang, put it in high gear and let the motor down to 2,000 RPM and floor it. It ain't gonna run good, y'all. It's trying to back up. Quit doing that. Why do we care what it makes in high gear at 2,000 RPM? Why? Why do we care how much it makes in 6th gear at 2,000 RPM? Why not downshift? Mustangs, Camaros, pickup trucks come with an 8-speed. They got new Mustangs out there with 10 speeds. I drove an 18-wheeler with a full of 13 speed. I didn't try to take off in high gear, and I did not want to pass somebody on the freeway in my 18-wheeler and 13th drop it in the big hole and let the motor all the way down off the cam and then stand on it and hope I could go somewhere. No, I have to drop it back to low range. And I'd rev it up. Nope, that's not good enough. Now I can go somewhere. I'm not holding it down here at the bottom, and you aren't either. That's a bunch of baloney. Top fuel cars got 1 year. Yep. But have you ever looked at what they do when they launch? They take them up there and launch 8,000 RPM, and they hold them 8,000 all the way down the track with the clutch. They're keeping the clutch. Yes, you can hear it pull down. Maybe they pull it down to 7,500 and then let it rev out to about 8,000 by the end of the track. It's another good example of what I want to share that people do. My friend David Crane, he did a good job. I was over there one day talking to him about camshafts, and he put a 30-30 in a stock 107, and the guy's bike ran in here And you know, they got a rev limiter on a brand new 2020. They rev limiter out about 5,500. What does that say? 4,000, whatever. They rev limiter out pretty good. They don't run good up higher. So I drew an imaginary line to show what it would do. I drew an imaginary torque line to show what it would do if I could get them to cross at 5,200 like they should. With the cam and the pipe, it did. It crossed way up here like it's supposed to at 5,200. But look how much torque it had at the bottom. This is in high gear. And this is how much torque it had stock. And this is how much torque it has now with the cam. But you don't ride right there, y'all. Downshift. You'll love it. Now I'm going to go to the Hayabusa just to prove a point. We have a Hayabusa right here. Look at this guy's dyno sheet. This is a basically stock Hayabusa. This is not about who's on the dyno sheet. This is not about what's done to this motorcycle. This is typical where it revs up to 11,000 RPM. Has 200 horsepower at 10,000, and it has 100 foot-pounds at 10,000. But the doggone thing crosses at 5,200 like all engines. Diesel engine. You know what? A diesel engine, you can't find the horsepower and the torque cross because the engine won't rev to 5,200 unless it's a racing diesel. But at 5,200, even a Kenworth would cross at 5,200. Here's a Hayabusa over here at 100 horsepower and 100 foot-pounds of torque. 100 horsepower and 100 foot-pounds of torque at 5,200. That's why you got a transmission in this thing. If you've got this motorcycle in 6th gear and you let this engine roll down to 2,000 RPM, it's going to have, come over here to 2,000, it's going to have about 30 horsepower. And it's going to have, about 70 foot-pounds of torque. And it's going to feel like a 125. It's going to be super, super slow. So downshift it. Go from high to 5th. Go from 5th to 4th. Go from 4th to 3rd and let this bad boy rip. Get finished with the torque curve. Get over here where it makes some power. And when you see a Hayabusa going down the road and he's trying to outrun whoever he's with, he ain't over here messing around. He's not over here messing around over here where the torque and horsepower cross. He's not over here messing around where it makes peak torque. He's over here from the 5,200 number to the right, just like I'll put right here. 5,200, he's over here all the time, unless you're just starting off. And when you start off in a Hayabusa, you don't even run it down low like that. Last good piece that was a lot of fun that proved a point to me was the farm bike. This is my first bagger that we raced. It was a 98 cubic inch, little baby 2003. We could not believe it, but we kept putting big valves, big heads, big cams, big pipes, big throttle bodies, big valves, big pipes, big throttle bodies, big cams. We made it only 98 cubic inches, but look at here, y'all. This thing made 140 horsepower. And I turned it 7,000 RPM. I turned it over 7,000 RPM. And when I'd shift, it would come back to 55 to 6,000, and it would still be making this much power. And here's the 5,200 number where the torque and horsepower cross. But I got to tell y'all, this motorcycle made 140 horse and made 119 foot-pounds. This motorcycle right here went in the 10s all the time with only 119 foot-pounds, and nobody would believe me it was a 98 until the guys bought it and took it apart and they saw it was really a 98. But look at the shape of this. It's got a nice flat torque curve, and the RPM, the horsepower is just going up and up and up. But this is a Harley Davidson with only 98 cubic inches. It came stock with 88, I believe, and we just put a piston kit in it. And then, of course, at that time, I said, let's put the biggest cam, the biggest valves, the biggest pipe, and the biggest throttle body we could get on and rev it up. Nice valve springs, ran titanium valves in it, and it would rev up. And I was wrong about being the last thing. I want to show you about the horsepower cam and the torque cam. We sell a lot of our 3/4 cams for the boys with the 128s, 131s for their new Milwaukee 8s. This is a stock 131 as it comes from Harley with a Thunder header, a 64 millimeter throttle body, the right injectors, a good tuner. The guys at where was that at in Maine there was Cullen Gillis over there at Garner Racing Concepts, Stanley Garner shop. They tuned this for me. And this little curve is with the stock stock Screaming Eagle 131 cam. This is the stock Screaming Eagle 131 cam. He put the 3/4 in it and tuned it, and it didn't change the torque at all. So if you're worried about how much torque the 3/4 cam, it made as much as the Harley torque cam did. But look at it over here at 5,200. It took off and put 10 more horse on it. So if you're out there running your boys and you want to outrun them, you put 2 bike links on them in second gear, put 2 bikes on them in third, 2 bikes on them in fourth, 2 bikes on them in fifth. Next thing you know, you're 10 bike links in front of them just by changing the cam. And it's hard for them to believe that's what really happened. Is there more to this story? Oh my gosh, yes. But this is the thing that really matters. Go out there in your car, go out there in your motorcycle, your Harley, your Kawasaki, your Suzuki, your Chevrolet, your Ford, your Chrysler, your Mustang, your Challenger, I don't care. Get in it, put it in high gear, and floor it at 2,000 and see if you like it. If you don't like it running right there, why would you have it dynoed right there? Let's dyno it where we want it to be. This does nothing but hurt the motorcycle. It does nothing but hurt the engine. And it also makes us make decisions for how this motorcycle runs based on some data you'll never run. You'll never duplicate this situation on the highway. If you ever measure, or if you ever record data going down the road, show me how many seconds out of 10,000 miles, how many seconds out of 10,000 miles you floor it in high gear at 2,000 RPM. That's all I got. I got up on the tire. I hit the rev limiter, but I'm thankful, and God bless you all for watching. Please tune in for the milestone of Tech Talk 150 next week, and I'll look at these questions and the comments, and I will answer. Thank you very much. May God bless y'all. Good night.